don't want you to get mad at me. I want to take a shot at this. You made world news when you had a really bad wreck.
Yeah.
You had a near fatal accident is what's the story reads. I read the articles.
Yeah.
And after attempting a backflip, you lost a kidney and 4 pints of blood. And I don't want this to be a long question, but I just want to say this. I see what a good Christian man you are, and I see how beautiful you are to your family.
Mm-hmm.
It is said that wreck where you almost killed yourself changed you. Tell me about that time.
Yeah, for sure. It's a moment in time, but it was one of the most pivotal moments. And I'd grown up in a small town, went to church on the weekends. My dad would take us to a Catholic church, and I felt like we just went because it was right. It just looked good, like for the family to do that. There was really no ever super connection there. I actually dreaded going, to be honest. It was so boring sitting in the pews and stuff. And so it really turned me away from it. Let's be honest.
Hyperactive.
Yeah. And so I went out through my life. Eventually we started racing every weekend, which canceled that out. But I was always intrigued by that. But I went through those, tough times and was the rebel guy and really pushed away from it. But it was, and then I met Marisa, which later became my wife, and her parents were Christian and they were real welcoming. And as much as I was like the rebel guy or did whatever I did, they were always forgiving and welcoming. And I was intrigued by that. But I was still that guy. And so we went through these years of I think struggle, really, of just trying to find my place. And then Haley was born. And then that was a big pivotal moment that I was like, man, I really need to be a dad. I really need to, focus on, that aspect, because my mom leaving, I just, really taught me really need to be there as a parent. And so we go to, I would say Haley was probably 2 or 3 years old. And I go to do the show, MTV Viva La Bam. It was kind of the big thing, like Jackass style.
I remember it.
Videos with Johnny Knoxville and all
that.
Yeah. So they invite the militia out there to Pennsylvania to their spot. So we go out there. We're all riding dirt bikes. They're skateboarding on the show, and they have bands playing, and they wanted me to backflip over the band, and it was really, really windy that day, like crazy, like crosswinds. And I wasn't gonna do it. I'm like, I ain't gonna do it, dude. It's too windy. And they just kind of said, I thought you could do it. Just kind of a little pressure situation that happens. And I'm like, all right, well, screw it. All right. So I go for it, and I flip, and the bike under rotates, and I hit the top of the landing, like bounce off the top of the landing, and then handlebars end up hitting my stomach really hard and going up under my rib cage and popping my kidney and my spleen, and basically exploding it, and it ripped it off the artery. And so I fell on the ground. I felt like I got shot in the stomach. It was burning hot. The stomach started growing, bleeding inside a ton, and they had no ambulance there. And so I ended up finally 45 minutes later get in my fire truck, and they take me to the hospital. And at this point, I'm barely awake, like falling asleep. And I just remember, like, I was chewing my tongue, like trying to stay awake. Like it was brutal. And I just I knew if I fell asleep, like that was it. And I was like laying there. I'm like, oh, just going, man, am I gonna really die right now? And thinking about, my wife, my kid. At this point, it was just Haley, and she was 3. So we make it to the hospital, emergency surgery. Like doctors are all around, and they rushed me in because I didn't have much of a pulse left, and it was real light. And I go in, and the doctor leans over me and just is like, hey, I just remember he's an Indian doctor, and I just will never forget his face. And he had a mask on, and he's like, I'm going to go in and see what's going on. He's like, you have very light pulse. He's like, we're going to do everything we can. He's like, is there anything you want to tell your family? He's like, and I was like, oh my gosh, dude, this is like, I'm going to die. And I said, just tell him I love him. And I was like, in that moment, And I just remember sitting, like looking up and just going, please God, like if you're real, if this is the moment, I go, this is it. I'm changing. I'm all in. Like I'm not. It's just I don't want to die. And I was like, I want to live. And I was like, this will be my pivotal changing moment. And it was, dude, it's heavy. Like it's hard for me to even think about it anymore. So
I'm
yeah.
nauseous right now. This is
Yeah.
incredible.
It's like
Keep going.
really
Keep
makes me
going.
like, if I like really think hard into it, it literally makes me tear up because it's such a heavy moment. Like, and it's easy for me to move on and have so much other stuff happen in my life, but that was probably the biggest moment of my life as far as like a reality. Like nothing becomes more real when your life's about to end, right? And not many people have that moment that helps them change, right? A lot of people have to do it just on, oh, I should change, and don't get put into like the final moment. And so for me, that was it. And I just prayed. I was like, oh my God, please, I don't want to die. Because at that point, I really thought I'm going to go under. I'm probably not going to wake up. And so I mean, I was up barely hanging on, like chewing my tongue, like falling, like barely awake. But I remember what he said. And so I went to sleep, and I just remember waking up, and I was like, oh, yes. I was just so happy that I woke up. And I was in the hospital, tubes everywhere. They cut my stomach all the way down. They pulled all my organs out, put them back in. Yeah, like laid them all out to like every organ one at a time till they find what's wrong. And so, and they put everything back, and I had tubes everywhere. And my wife was in the room. My dad was in the room. This was on the East Coast. Like that surgery was so long that they had time to fly from California to Pennsylvania, and they were in the room when I woke up. So that was it was like a 12-hour surgery. So, and the guy, like literally after that, I just called the guy, the doctor, and I said, hey, thanks. I go, thanks for saving my life. I go, because that was a fight, I'm sure it was not easy for that many hours to get my body going. And so that was a pivotal moment, man. I just, at that moment, I said, I'm done. Boom, turn. And we were in the hospital. The story isn't done. So I'm in the hospital for weeks because the recovery in this hospital was pretty run down, like wasn't top of the line. And my wife's like, oh man, we just got to get out of here. And so she started feeling sick and got really sick. And then she found out she was pregnant with Hayden in the hospital. And I'm like, man, that's crazy. Like, imagine if things would have went the other way, right? Like,
This
and
whole
so
moment.
just pivotal. Like, I'm like, there's too many coincidences here to just blow it off, and so that was every moment I feel there was God just showing me like, boom, 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 all these things that are important, and going, okay, here's your chance. And so, I went home recovering, and I'll never forget. I got home and I set stitches everywhere. It was a brutal flight home, and because they told me not to fly home, and I'm like, dude, I'm going home. They didn't even want me to leave the hospital. This is probably wasn't the smartest. I called a cab and went down and left the hospital after 2 weeks because I'm like, I can't be in here any longer. This is brutal. So I go down. They said, if you get on a flight, there's a chance your insides could start bleeding and you won't make it till you hit the ground. And these are things I don't really talk about. I just remember now. But so I'm like, we're going. And I remember trying to get on the flight, and I looked like death. Like I was skinny, white, like I was like been in the hospital for 2 weeks. I still have my gown on.
No, you did not.
Yes. And they didn't, because I
Oh
jumped
my
in a
God.
cab and bailed. I just pinned it. One day I was like, I'm out of here. Boom. And they didn't want to release me. And so I basically went to the airport with me and Marisa, and I got on the flight, and they wouldn't let me on the plane. They're like, no, they're like, you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I just crashed on my motorcycle. And they're like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. And this is kind of before it got crazy flying, and they said, okay. So they let me on the plane, and I got on. I just remember flying. There's like turbulence, and I'm just laying there going, oh man, I was like, don't, this is bad. And anyway, I land, get to the house. I just remember Haley hadn't seen me for a while, comes running over and jumps right on my stomach. And I'll never forget that. And I was like, ah. And I felt super bad because got super scared. She started crying, and I was like,
Oh,
and I was scared because it jumped right on my stitches, and I was like, because I just didn't want to start bleeding again. Anyway, these are all little things that are popping back to me, and that was my moment. Change, boom, going to church. I had a few moments before that were near death, but it wasn't enough, obviously, to change. But this was. So I changed that. Kind of basically had to tell my friends that I hung out with that were, not, the best of quality friends. Like, hey, can't hang out. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go. I got to start, focusing on, what the family stuff and everything I'm doing. It was a tough one. That, after being this certain person for so long and having this whole group of people for so long, that was a tough transition. But it had to be done. And there was moments that it was like, pulled me the other way. I got pulled this way and pulled that way. And I felt like, man, that was tough, a very tough battle for me. But eventually when I got through that, that was the best decision. And I really started focusing on my family. And I feel like it was the right, the right path, So, and look where we are today, not saying I'm perfect by no means. I'm still make all kinds of stupid mistakes and do dumb stuff all the time. But yeah, that was a big pivotal moment.
so that you just gave the definition of a real man.
Yeah.
A man that takes care of his family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have 3 daughters.
Okay.
First of all, I can never relate with. Well, I mean, I've had some pretty bad wrecks.
Yeah.
But I'm not even going to compare to you. But so as I listen to you,
Uh-huh.
you asked God to save your life,
Mm-hmm.
and He did. So that would have been pretty stingy if you didn't straighten yourself up, because He saved your life. He gave that doctor the brains, the wisdom to save your life.
Yeah.
You know that. You thank the doctor, and you're still crazy. You escape out of the hospital with your hospital gown on. I feel like writing a script for a movie.
Yeah. I know, right? Yeah.